Hello and welcome to episode 4 of 10 or Less, the educational podcast where we take a boring chapter from a textbook and convert to a video 10 minutes or less. Today we are once again continuing environmental science and looking at climate change. But before we get into climate change, there's one thing we need to cover really quickly, and that's the greenhouse effect. So the sun provides a lot of energy to the earth. The sunlight comes and hits the earth and warms us up and all that. But the most important part about the greenhouse effect is this little chunk here. I'm sorry, the image is kind of blurry because it's the JPEG, and yes, there are pixels all over the place, but you'll have to just deal with it for now. The area where the earth is re-emitting heat, because this earth will absorb the light and energy from the sun, and it'll re-emit that as infrared energy. That energy shoots out of the earth and it'll hit the atmosphere. And as it flies through the atmosphere, it'll hit greenhouse gases, which absorb that energy and redirect it again. This kind of bouncing effect between energy causes most of it to get stuck within the atmosphere and can continuously bounce back and forth between the surface of the earth and the atmosphere. That is essentially a greenhouse effect because it acts in a similar way to a greenhouse, where the glass will allow energy to come in, the plants will absorb it. Once energy tries to escape, it'll actually hit the glass and come back inside, keeping the greenhouse nice and toasty on the inside. Now, there's something about to be said. There's a lot of controversy over the greenhouse effect. Scientists have argued that global climate change, they've argued about it for a long time. Today, in 2012 at least, we've come to a consensus, not a complete agreement though. The biggest argument is that people who are skeptical about global climate change, their main argument is basically we don't know how much humans are impacting it and whether or not we are at big fault, because there are other aspects of global climate change that I'll get to in a moment. But regardless, climate change is happening. We've noticed something going on. Whether or not it's caused by humans or from natural causes, we better do something about it rather than just argue with each other. So, to make things clear, climate change is basically the greenhouse effect gone out of control. While they are related, they are not the same thing. So major greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and water vapor. And those of you skeptical, yes, water vapor is a greenhouse gas. There's a lot of water in the atmosphere, and all that water does contribute to the greenhouse effect. Basically, more greenhouse gases, the greater the greenhouse effect is, because there are more particles, more gas molecules floating around the atmosphere that absorb that energy that the Earth is re-emitting and then bounce it back and forth within each other. So, more gases, greater effect. What are the sources? Well, there's a lot of sources. First off, the natural ones. Volcanoes, forest fires, the ocean, the sun. All these are natural sources that contribute to the greenhouse effect. The picture that you see here with the massive volcano, you see all that dust? There's a lot of carbon dioxide in there, and that's a lot more than we humans can emit within a single day, despite the global population. There's a lot of stuff coming out of that volcano. Next, the non-natural ones. Cars, airplanes, burning coal for electricity, agriculture, pretty much anything we do that involves getting energy out of something, which is our main way of doing it now is by burning something, that contributes to greenhouse gases. And once again, it's not a matter of who or what caused it, it's happening, and we should try to see if we can do something about it. So why should we care in the first place? Well, first of all, it has a direct effect on climate, though not necessarily weather. Climate is a look at weather over the long time period, over a course of a year. That's why climate is considered annual. When you see those climate graphs, they measure precipitation and temperature over a year rather than a single month or a week. Weather, on the other hand, is a very short time, often referred to as a daily phenomenon. So it may be very cold one day, or it might be snowing in Washington, D.C., but trying to say that is evidence against global warming, that's kind of silly. So next, economics. First of all, global warming, climate change, and all that causes changing in growing seasons for crops, and it may prevent certain crops from growing in certain locations. Say a type of grapes grown in France for wine. You may not be able to grow that particular strand of grapes anymore because the weather now is slightly too cold or slightly too hot during the times when it's supposed to be growing. So the old traditions that you guys have, growing farms or growing crops on your farms in a particular manner, may not work out, or you may need to change it because the growing seasons might get longer, they might get shorter, it might get hotter in the summer or colder in the winter, so it may prevent certain crops from being grown. Next, society and health. Widespread illness and diseases transmitted by insects. You know how mosquitoes don't like the cold? Well, if global warming happens and the average temperature of the Earth starts to rise even 1 or 2 degrees, that's a lot more leeway for those mosquitoes to float around. Next, loss of habitats for both humans and animals. There are places that will be too hot, too dry, or maybe even too cold for us to live anymore because of the way the climate is changing around the world. And finally, another controversial issue, sea level rise, floods in islands and coastal regions. This is mainly because as the Earth warms up, more and more ice will melt, and there's a lot of ice on this planet. So if all that starts to melt, then it's going to start making the sea level rise. Or at least that's what the logic is behind it. So, dealing with it. How do we deal with it? Well, first of all, there's 2 ways. One is to mitigate it, or in another way, to prevent it. It's to reduce the rate of greenhouse gas emissions to slow down the rate of global climate change. And that's things like carpooling or using efficient renewable energies instead of gas. Next is adaptation, or cleaning it up. This is basically saying, yeah, the greenhouse effect has gone out of control, global warming is going to happen, so we better, buckle down and deal with it. It's to create new strategies to work with global climate change and reduce its harmful effects. This is a bit more difficult because we have to anticipate how the climate's going to change and develop strategies to work with it rather than against it. So if a certain place is getting too hot or too cold, we might have to start looking into strategies on conserving water or finding alternative ways to acquire more water during the hot summer months rather than saying, all right, let's just get up. Well, that actually counts. Just, upping and just leaving the area, that also counts as adaptation. So that's a quick overview of greenhouse effect and climate change, why we should care, and some of the sources that it comes with. There's a lot more information out there, and this is just a really brief overview, but hopefully this will get you thinking onto what climate change means. And for those of you who think climate change and the greenhouse effect is bad, the greenhouse effect is not bad. That's what keeps us warm every single day. When the sun disappears, if we didn't have the atmosphere keeping us warm, we'd be freezing cold every single day. But climate change, on the other hand, we're not so quite sure on that. Anyways, that's all for today. Thanks for watching.